Hello everyone and welcome to a game a lot of you have requested, and not this game in particular, but you said you guys would enjoy seeing at least one game from Netflix's new series, The Queen's Gambit. And I'm not gonna throw around any spoilers if you guys still haven't seen it, so if you wanna check out the series first and then watch this video, then just end it now. It's very short, it's only 7 episodes, so it will take you some 8 hours to watch it. So like if you have 8 hours free, maybe today or some other day, you can watch it in one day, but you could also, like me, watch it through the course of, I think we've seen it, within some 4 days. But regardless, it's it's really great. I've seen much worse movies made based on chess. So this is really a great series. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. And this is again, spoiler alert, if any of you want to watch it, and ended the video now and only come back to it after you've seen the series. But this is the final game of the series, where our main protagonist, Elizabeth Harmon, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, takes on the world champion, in this case Vasily Borgov. And it's quite the game. It's quite the game, and it's based on an actual game. We're going to talk about that after we check out the game, or at least until we reach the position where the game shifts and takes a different turn. So without further ado, let's check it out. It's quite a beauty of the game. The actual game is quite a beauty. The game that they made for the show that was based on the actual game is, well, even greater, but it was made with the help of some incredibly strong grandmasters, and I imagine very, very strong chess engines. So without further ado, let's check it out. Elizabeth Hartman with the white pieces opens with d4, and it's very interesting. The show is called The Queen's Gambit, so we might expect a d4 on the board, but throughout her entire life she was an e4 player. And only when facing the world champion, she employs a d4. Now, is that someone? Does that remind you of someone else we know from that particular era? But okay, we have d5 by Borgov, c4. The Queen's Gambit is on the board, and the d captures on c4, so accepting the Queen's Gambit. We have e4 and knight to c6 now, with a double attack on the d4 pawn, bishop to e3 defending, and now knight to f6. We have knight to c3, defending the e4 pawn as it was attacked, and now e5 by black. White replies with d5, grabbing more space in the center, and the knight to e7. The knight can come to g6 in the future and find some use there. We have bishop captures on c4, recapturing the gambited pawn, and knight to g6 now. And now f3, just setting up a very strong center here, while white continues development. We have bishop to d6 and queen to d2 now. Bishop to d7, both players just continue developing, and knight g to e2. We have a6, preparing b5 and some queenside expansion, and bishop to b3. In anticipation of this, we have b5, and now Elizabeth decides to attack the flank here with a4. Both players castle, we have castles, and now comes queen to e7. So just continuing development, and rook 8 to c1, putting pressure on the c file. Black still has a backward c7 pawn, so we might be able to do something about that. And here, knight to h5, saying that, okay, the f4 square is a square I'm going to use for my knights. I'm going to play f5, maybe bust open the position, maybe play f4. We'll see how it goes. As white only has a light square bishop, and with the pawns set on light squares here, it's not going to be a very, very useful piece. So here g3, taking away the f4 square from the knights, and now h6. Just improving the position a little bit before continuing the attack. Bishop to c2, and now comes rook 8 to b8. Now with ideas of pushing the pawn, you could also maybe capture. You could go bishop to b4 and then capture. So a lot of ideas here. So white captures on b5 instead. A captures on b5, and now as the a file opened up, rook to a1, with ideas of shifting the rook over to a7. And finding some use on the 7th rank. Rook to a8, Borgov of course does not allow that, and now bishop to d3 with a double attack on the b5 pawn. Bishop to b4, pinning the knight, so now the pawn cannot be captured, and rook captures on a8. We have one rook trade on the a file, captures, and queen to c2 now, unpinning and once again introducing the threat of picking up the b5 pawn. So bishop back to c5, now saying, okay, your bishop is unguarded here. You still cannot capture the b5 pawn. You have to deal with this. And here, Elizabeth defends with knight to d1. Now, it's a very interesting idea. So what can be done here? The b5 pawn is no longer under attack. However, your bishop on e3 is defended. And if you trade here, then the knight gets to the e3 square. Then the knight can come to f5 and so on. So here, bishop back to d6 by Borgov. Now just again defending his backwards c7 pawn. And knight to f2. Improving the position of the knights. And here we have a beautiful move by Borgov, knight h to f4. So it's just an amazing move. The knight can be captured by the pawn, by the bishop, by the knight. Also, bonus question for you great knowledgeable chess fans. What other game features a spectacular knight to f4 move that could be captured in a lot of ways? So that's also played in Russia, so that's a good question for you. But that out of the way, not capturing the knight, as that would be a completely different game where white would have to settle for defending the position being attacked. For example, captures, the bishop is attacked, bishop c1, knight h4. Black still having the bishop paired, the rook can join the attack, the queen can come into the attack, so it would be a game where white has to defend. So instead, after this knight to h to f4, we have rook to c1. In the series, Elizabeth is not portrayed as someone who plays boring chess, who likes to trade, who likes to go for the endgame. She's portrayed as someone who plays spectacular chess, makes flashy sacrifices, ends the game very quickly. Whereas Vasily Borgov, the Russian, the world champion, of course, is known as I believe, as the best endgame player in the world. So of course she wants to avoid that at any cost. So queen to g5 now. Adding the queen to the attack, and immediately with a threat, you have to be very careful. For example, if the knight moves somewhere with check, you might lose the bishop on e3. Not something you want to do. Then you'd be stuck with a light square bishop, and your light squares aren't really made for your light square bishop at the moment. So here, king to h1, not allowing any checks, and now queen to h5. Again, allowing this knight to be captured, but capturing the knight is just terrible. Queen captures on f3 with check, and believe it or not, you're getting checkmated. King to g1, knight h4, threatening checkmate, and there's not much you can do. King f1, queen g2 check, you're gonna go king e1, knight to f3 check, also taking the d1 square from your king, king to d1, and queen to f1 is now checkmate. Unbelievable. But it is possible here. I mean, there are so many pieces here. Look at this. And the queen and knight deliver checkmate. So this is what happens if the knight is captured. So instead, knight to g1, and now comes knight captures on d3. So grabbing that bishop, we have knight captures back on d3, and only now f5. Borgov continues the onslaught here on the king side. We have knight to c5 going after the light square bishop, and just the calm bishop to c8, taking care of everything, nicely controlling the knight here. Rook to f1, if the f file opens up, you do want to have your rook there, and now knight to e7. So what do you do here? Queen to d3, again putting pressure on the pawn here, and now comes f captures on e4, not allowing white a moment's rest. F captures, and now queen to g6, again asking white, what do you want to do here? And well, it's never possible to capture the b5 pawn. For example, if you capture it, then black just removes the defender of the e4 pawn, and after, let's say, bishop captures, just queen captures on e4, getting rid of an extremely important pawn, and black would be very much winning here. So instead, after queen to g6, we have king to g2, improving the position of the king, preparing knight to f3, and king to h7 now. Black does the same. We have knight to f3, and now comes knight to g8. Now the knight is coming into the attack. Knight to h4, putting pressure on the queen, and queen to g4. And now finally grabbing hold of that f5 square, making the bishop looking a little bit weird here, as he's not doing all that much. And you never really want to give it up for this knight here. However, we have knight to f6, and now comes h3. And here we reach a very interesting position, because without playing h3, you just run into captures, and then you lose the e4 pawn, and then the entire game is lost, the position just crumbles. However, after h3, such things are not possible. The queen has to move. And interestingly, in the series, in this final game, Borgov adjourns the game. He says he wants to adjourn the game. He puts the move in the little envelope. The arbiter takes it, and the game will be continued tomorrow. And for those of you who are just joining in the chess world, who are not who maybe don't know what an adjournment is, when a game is adjourned, it means that, okay, we've played it enough today, we're going to continue it tomorrow, and then we're just going to continue from the same position. Such a thing is not possible today, because you would just allow the engine to crunch the game, and you would have all the answers in the morning, so it would basically be a matter of preparation, which is similar, but when in those days when you analyze the game yourself throughout the course of the entire night, or for example, if you were a world champion and you had an entire team of seconds who would analyze for you and just gave you the answers in the morning, it would be much better, of course, because you would be much more well rested for the next day. However, I'm not going to spoil too much what happens here. Basically, the game is adjourned and continued tomorrow. So here, tomorrow, after this h3 move, Borgov plays queen to g6, and here we reach the position. So up until this point, this was an actual game, believe it or not. Such a crazy fighting game. I'm only sorry that we've never shown the game as it actually was. It's actually a game played by none other than Vasily Ivanchuk with the white pieces against Patrick Wolf from the 1993 Biel Chess Festival. I don't know if it was called a chess festival there, but it was played in Biel, and the game ended in a draw. Vasily played the g4 here, and it was a brutal fighting game. Lasted a lot of moves, but in the end ended in a draw. We might show the actual game as well at some point. However, here, as this Netflix series, Elizabeth Hartman finds an improvement on Chucky's move, and she plays knight to e6. And here our game really starts, because up until this point it was all an actual game that was actually played in 1993, but here we finally enter the fiction area of the game. So here, while you could capture the knight, it doesn't really offer you all that much. You just give white a passed pawn, and now whether this is good, whether you can defend this, whether you want to defend this guy, or you want to stop the passed pawn, it could go different ways, but it doesn't really matter, because Borgov here plays the absolute best move, and that is rook to a4. He goes after the e4 pawn, and now, well, we already mentioned that the e4 pawn is basically the thing holding white's entire position together, so it would be very unrealistic to give it up, but it is tempting to give it up. What about the g7 pawn? Can we just capture the g7 pawn? What happens if we do? Well, it's one thing that we have to consider. For example, knight e captures on g7, and now we give up the e4 pawn, and now the knight just retreats. And here we have a completely crazy position where black has knight captures on g3. Now, you cannot capture with the king or the knight, because the king, well, cannot capture, and if the knight captures, the queen hangs on d3. However, there is the incredible knight to e7. White sacrifices the queen, and now you can either capture the queen and go into what white wants, or you could just capture the knight and say, okay, I'm not interested in your silliness. So let's see what happens if you capture the knight. If you capture the knight, you get rook to f7 check. The black queen is pinned, so you cannot capture this. King to g8, and now queen captures on g6 with check. King to h8, and now rook captures, or queen to g7 or h7 is checkmate. Not captures without captures, but it is checkmate. And after this knight to e7 move, if you actually accept the queen sacrifice, then it's rook to f7 check, and we have a draw by repetition. King h8, rook f8 check, king h7, rook to f7 check, and so on. So after rook to a4, this is actually accepting a draw. So here Elizabeth goes for b3. And it's such a wonderful move. Again, allows black so many options. Do you go for rook to a8? Do you go for rook captures on e4? Do you go for knight captures on e4? So we're just gonna briefly check out what happens. For example, after rook to a8 check, white can block, and here, let's say we trade rooks, captures. We get this position where the e4 pawn is nicely defended, and the g7 pawn still hangs. So could be good. Maybe you can, maybe you can take one of the knights and just continue continue the game in that way. However, it's again incredibly interesting what happens if knight captures on e4. Then you sacrifice the rook, b captures on a4, knight captures on g3, sorry, the wrong knight, again with the same idea. If knight captures, you hang the queen, but again we have knight to e7. Now just if captures, then you can capture the queen and pick up the knight, so there's that. But also if the queen is accepted, then we have another draw by repetition, knight to f8 check, taking away all of these squares from the black king, and here we would just have another draw by repetition. King h8, knight checks, king h7, knight checks, and so on, another draw by repetition. So here after b3, we have the third move that we still haven't checked, so not this, but rather rook captures on e4, which was played in the actual series, and here we have to ask ourselves what happens next. So here knight captures on d6 is the move. So knight captures on d6, removing the defender of the f8 square, and now knight to f8 check is a huge problem for black. So of course you cannot play cd, as then just check and you lose the queen. So bishop captures on e6 is a must, which allows Elizabeth to create a beautiful pass pawn here, and now c captures on d6, which gives Borgov an incredibly strong center. If this pawn starts rolling down the board, it's going to be very difficult. So here Elizabeth pushes e7. The d8 square is nicely protected. However, that can change very easily. And here we have another beautiful moment in the game and in the series. d5 is played, and d5 is a problem because when they adjourned the game yesterday, and well, not trying to spoil anything, but the game was analyzed and a lot of continuations were considered. So d5 was not amongst the continuations that were considered, and this was a problem for Elizabeth because she now had to start thinking. Up until this point, I believe she had everything analyzed at home for the game. So the thing is, she starts staring at the ceiling, and this was just an incredible moment for me because it's a game by none other than the great Vasily Ivanchuk from the 1993 Biel tournament, and who stares at the ceiling more than Vasily Ivanchuk? Now, when Elizabeth stares at the ceiling in the series, it's for a good reason, but you know, when Ivanchuk stares at the ceiling, I'm sure it's also for a very good reason. So here d5 was played. And it's actually a pretty strong move because well, the rook is nicely defended here. For example, if you don't play such a move, if you play something like b4, let's just say you make a move, you ruin the game immediately because just rook captures on f6. And we already said you have to remove the defenders of the e8 square. So here g captures, so the queen would still keep on defending it, but just e8 queen. And that's it. You have to capture the queen, and the rook is now eliminated. And black does have 2 extra pawns, but it's not going to help all that much against the bishop. So here after e7, d5 fixes that issue, because now after rook captures, just g captures, there's no this, the rook is nicely defended. So instead, after d5, we have this beautiful bishop to c5 move, defending the passed pawn and preparing to cement the position with b4. And black doesn't really have all that many options because, well, like we said, you have to keep an eye on this square. If you move the rook, white can, for example, just trade queens and then pick off the knight, promote the pawn to a queen. Even if you trade queens and go knight back, the rook can still come to f8 and harass the knight. So it's a very passive position for black to play. So here we have queen back to e8, guarding the b5 pawn while also hanging on to the queening square, and white doesn't seem to have all that much to do. Queen to f3, now with some ideas of queen to f5 check, although it doesn't really promise all that much, and queen to c6 by Borgov. We have b4 defending the bishop, and now this is a beautiful setup here, nicely controlling the rook here. Not much for black to do, and here you have to play king to g8. King to g8 is the only good move for black here, just a waiting move, waiting to see what white will play. However, Borgov makes his, well, first big mistake of the game. He plays queen back to e8, thinking probably, I don't know if he was thinking that because it's show that he might be able to repeat moves, maybe with queen to c6, queen to e8. However, this completely blunders the game. Here, he actually offered her a draw, which means that if she accepts, then it's a tie between her and the world champion on this tournament. In those days, if you remember, they had shared firsts, which is now again being introduced in online chess, something that I thought was very weird. But okay, here he offers a draw, and she declines the draw. She says, nope, we play on, and she plays queen to f5 with check. And now it's well, it's a very tough decision, because if you go king to g8, which is possible, then you get queen to e6 check, king has to go back, and now you just give up the rook. Captures, next move it's queen to f8, and the pawn gets promoted. This one check doesn't do all that much, the king can just attack the rook, you waste a move, and again queen to f8 is coming. So king to g8 is out of question, so king to h8 is what Borgov plays. But now feel free to pause the video and win this game for Elizabeth while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting a beautiful, beautiful queen sacrifice. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's queen captures on f6. You know, when was another beautiful game played where the queen was sacrificed on f6? That's also a question. So g captures on f6, and now rook captures on f6. So now Elizabeth is down a queen, but rook to f8 check is coming, and there's not much black can do about it. We have queen to h5, trying to go for some sort of a mating attack. If maybe you can start checking the white king, maybe good things will happen. However, rook to f8 with check, and this is the only good move. You have to move with great haste, so you also have to defend the queening square. Rook to f8 check, king to g7, and now just e8 queen, bringing another queen into the game, and now white is up a full bishop. And what an important bishop it is, because he can always retreat to the f2 square, guarding against any and all checks. So here, while black can capture and maybe trust his two pass pawns will be enough to handle the bishop, it's definitely not enough, and the white has all the compensation in the world. So here we have rook to e2 with check, and now comes, although here at this point they didn't show in the series what was actually played, so I had to reconstruct the game until they've shown the position that that was possible. So this is what I think that actually happened in the series. Rook to e2 check, king to f1, now attacking the rook, and now queen to h3 with check, because black has to move with tempo, otherwise he's just getting checkmated. So here a nice rook sacrifice and queen to g2, hoping to get some sort of a perpetual with queen to e4, but white shows that that's not happening. Rook to f2. We have queen to e4 check, now hoping for king to f1, followed by queen to h1, again going for some sort of a perpetual. But here Elizabeth just picks up the king and very, very slowly drags it all the way to d2. And well, it was in this position that Vasily Borgov, the world chess champion, resigned the game. And not only did he resign, he also stood up and gave her a standing ovation, like some other great Russian world champion we know. That you know, certain game 6. So a lot of similarities here in the show. And he was also very nice, like the person I'm talking about. But again, I don't want to spoil too much, because here you resign, there's nothing much to do. I mean, rook f7 is coming, bishop to f8 is coming, there's nothing to do here. And there are no more checks. The bishop covers everything, there's no check here, there's no check here, there's no check here, the pawn and rook cover that, so there are no checks. And whatever you play, it doesn't really matter, you're just getting checkmated. Bishop f8 check, there's nowhere to go, all of these squares are covered. Let's say queen f8 check, and now anything just delivers mate, queen g7. So of course after king to d2, Borgov resigned and Elizabeth wins the tournament, which was really incredible, as you know there were some incredibly strong players there. But yeah. Just so I don't forget, big shout out to Olympia Urkan, the chess historian, who cracked which game this was that they were playing. I was planning on you know, running all the moves through some databases that until I finally pick up on the games that were actually used in the show. But he already did this on Twitter, so big shout out to him. There you can see Beth Harmon's final game with Vasily Borgov. Her Russian nemesis is based on that spectacular draw between Ivanchuk and Wolf from the 1993 Biel Interzonal. So it's a Biel Interzonal. Now we know that as well. And there you have it in the series, the moment where she pushes h3 and he requests the adjournment of the game. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. The real game is incredible. The constructed game for the series is just out of this world. But they had a lot of help, you know, in the series for choosing games by some great names like Gary Kasparov. Bruce Pandolfini was also a member of the team, and probably some others that I don't know of. But I'm gonna study into it a bit more. So if you guys are interested in stuff like this, we can also make like a complete overview of the series, and you know, what's real, what's not, what was possible, what was not, and something like that. I don't know if you guys would be interested in that. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it, both the real one and the constructed one. I would like to thank HS App, Sergey Maximov, Vladimir Peric, David Trainer, and James Eugene for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the coverage of the Morphe saga, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And do check out the series. It's quite nice. See you soon, guys.